was August of 1978. Our shift started at 10:30, and as I left the sheriff's office to head out into my area, I got a call to go to a house on Lincoln Street East, which is Route 30, US 30. And when I got out of the car and met the people at the house, who were obviously distressed, what they described to me was hearing rocks or something hit the roof of their house.
As I recall, something initially happened to their dog. It was chained to a doghouse, and it was found like out of its collar and dead, and they didn't know what was happening, and they were getting their house pelted with rocks, and there were footprints, and they just didn't know if this was vandalism perhaps or something else.
Mid-70s, late 70s, that's when it really started getting active, and that's when all the publicity started coming around. And we seen it walking on the banks out there, and like I said, we thought it was just some guy messing around. So one night it was messing around, it was really bothersome. Wanted attention or just, and my brother, myself, and 2 or 3 of our friends, we chased this thing down.
Minerva is located in northeastern Ohio, approximately 18 miles east of Cayton, about 70 miles south of Cleveland. Almost equidistant between Cleveland and Pittsburgh, about 70 miles south of Cleveland and 70 miles west of Pittsburgh. It's rolling terrain. I've been told that we are where the glacier deposited its remains when it melted during the Ice Age. Just south of Minerva, rich in oil and gas. It's kind of the headquarters now of the new fracking industry in the state of Ohio. The village was started because of Sandy Creek that runs through town. And John Whitaker determined that there was enough fall in the creek that it would power a grist mill. And he built one, and that was standing in almost the center of town up until 1976 when it was torn down. There have been a couple of booms in town. Of course, Whitaker started with the grist mill, and then it was also on the Sandy Beaver Canal. And if you look at the way Market Street runs, and then Market Street takes like a 30-degree jog, and that was done to follow the canal. The canal backed up to a lot of businesses on Market Street. There were loading wharves and things where they could unload goods. When the canal went out, the railroad came in to take its place. And we have one of the largest railroad yards in the state. It's second only in our area to Cayton. The rail line yard runs about a mile long. I think it had 10 or 12 sidings to it. We had a roundhouse at one time, and there were 3 different rail lines that intersected in Minerva. One of the reasons we had such a large yard was that they would bring coal up from southeastern Ohio and stage the trains here in Minerva, and then send it out both to Pittsburgh and Cleveland. There was a train that left Minerva every day to take coal to the illuminating company in Cleveland to provide electricity for the city of Cleveland. That coal train originated here. In talking to the railroaders, they said that the diesel engine was the demise of the rail industry in town, because then they could put together trains that were almost a mile long and they didn't need the manpower that they had needed in the past to service everything and put the trains together.
We've got a great community, you know, and I suppose every mayor would say that. But ours is just exceptional, the people here. You know, their care and stuff for each other and for the community. Makes it a nice place.
What I like about the town of Minerva is it's quiet. All the people are friendly. And Minerva started out on a trail called the Great Trail. Then you had the canals. Then you had the railroad. Then they put US Route 30 through here. And then you had what they used to call State Route 80, and they changed the name to 183, or the number to 183. So we've always been a kind of a transportation hub, even though a lot of people say we're out in the woods or off the beaten path. But transportation and industry is what's going to bring people to any town, regardless of what the name is. And the name is kind of unique itself because it was the first name of the first female baby born in town, named after a person's family, you know what I mean? And the only industry in town then was the old mill, which ground mill down here at the local creek, and the guy diverted the water to make the water wheel.
We live on a very unique route, US Route 30, the Lincoln Highway. They were looking for a way to immortalize Abraham Lincoln, and a couple of magnates in the car industry needed a way to promote the use of automobiles. So they started the first intercontinental highway. It starts in Times Square and ends up in San Francisco. It was, for the most part, brick when they built it. The Caytons live about 2 miles outside of Minerva, between here and Robertsville, right on Route 30. You'll notice as you go along, there's a lot of woods between us and Robertsville on both sides of the road. So it has a country effect, even though it's along a well-traveled national highway.
It was August of 1978. Our shift started at 10:30, and as I left the sheriff's office to head out into my area, I got a call to go to a house on Lincoln Street East, which is Route 30, US 30. And the address I don't recall, but it was a little bit west of Minerva in Paris Township. And the people that lived there had seen a peculiar object or a peculiar thing.
They made a report to the sheriff's department, and one of our correspondents for the Beacon Journal had gone down and collected the police reports. And then I contacted the family and asked permission to come down and interview them, and they were very open. I was really the only reporter there for a long time, and the repository I don't think got on it for quite a while, and then after it went out on the wire, sort of the bombardment of outside media came. But for a long time I was just the only one there, and it was me and Deputy Shannon.
So my family bought the house in '64, and Probably a couple years after we moved in, we started hearing noises and some mischief going on around the house, and we always just thought it was a man that lived in the woods. That's what we always thought it was, a hermit lived in the woods. And we at the time, we outside, we had an old garage there. And it was always, we always hear something behind the garage. And we just thought it was someone messing around. Well, as time went on and everything, it got more and more active.
So I drove down there. It's probably about a 10, 12-mile drive from when I got the call, and pulled in their long lane driveway up to the house. And of course I had my spotlight on looking around to see what I could see. And of course I saw nothing, but when I got out of the car, they were waiting on me at the door. The people that lived there were waiting on me at the door. And when I got out of the car, there was a pretty strong ammonia smell. It was the first thing that I noticed, and I thought how peculiar that was. And kind of put it aside for the moment and met the people at the house who were obviously distressed. They were really distressed.
Of course, I was living here at the time. My sister Vicky on there, she lived in East Palestine at the time. Linda Jones lived in the trailer park, and my sister Becky lived in Cayton at the time. We were just all here because it was a family. A weekend. We always got together on weekends as family.
I talked to them about what had happened and all these sorts of things, and got them calmed down to the point that they could pretty much tell me what had happened in the last hour. And what they described to me was hearing rocks or something hit the roof of their house.
They were getting their house pelted with rocks, and there were footprints, and they just didn't know, if this was vandalism perhaps or something else.
We always had rocks thrown and messing around, knocking on the trees, howls, screeches.
One of them saw a large, hairy object up against their house. And of course, panicked, freaked out, ran in and told everyone else. And I think, if I remember rightly, one other person in that family saw it as well.
That evening at the kitchen table, and it appeared under the overhead floodlight. And it was just sort of looking in. Well, they couldn't see its eyes because no facial features were visible, but it was just standing there at the window, sort of looking in at them, what they assumed. And Mr. Cayton, I believe, got a shotgun and pointed it and didn't do anything. So that told him that, it wasn't somebody dressed up, because they would have run.
My mom, myself, my sister, and I believe it was my aunt sitting here at the kitchen table right where we're at now. And at that time, instead of the French doors, we had 3 windows there, big windows. And we're sitting here, and my mom happened to look up and seen this thing leaning down looking into the window. Well, of course, it startled us. And we're watching there, and stood there probably a minute, maybe 2 minutes, then it walked away. So, well, we couldn't get out that, so we had to go out that door. And we walked around the back, and we looked around, and we seen it just walking away off the top of the bank. We came back in the house probably 10, 15 minutes later, and next thing you know, we hit tapping on the side of the house, tapping on the windows and everything, just trying to get our attention. It wasn't harming nobody, but Scott Patterson, yes, I had a gun at that time. They pointed it at the creature, and it was, my mom told him, don't shoot, because and at that time, we still thought it was a man. Don't shoot, because you don't know what, I don't want to hurt nobody. So he just pointed at the creature, whatever you want to call it, and it just turned and walked away. Like, it's no big deal. It's not a threat to me, and I know you're not going to shoot me, so it just walked away. And it stayed quiet for a couple of days, but then it started coming back around.
I remember they described it as hairy and tall. And I think the mother told me that it was as tall as the eave of the house where the roof met the sidewalls.
when we first started seeing it, it was, I would say, between 6 and 7 foot tall, covered in hair. It was. It still had facial features. It wasn't completely like a rag mop, you know, over the face and everything. It had facial features and everything. Had eyes, you could see. But it probably weighed a good 400 to 500 pounds, I'd say, maybe more. You know, muscular, because you could see it wasn't like I said, like a mop hanging from its arms. Or anything. It was hairy, but you could still see the muscular physique and all that. But yeah, it was a fairly good size creature, being, whatever you want to call it.
I went out to the chicken coop where they said this thing was, and I couldn't see anything. I found no tracks of it or anything like that. But the ammonia smell was pretty strong. I mean, it was noticeable. I found some fur that was on a nail that was protruding out of this old chicken coop that was there. It was grayish brown, and it was almost like a mohair or a real fine, fuzzy kind of hair. And I collected it. But back then, DNA wasn't a very commonplace thing that we used. So I ended up submitting it later on to a college professor at Malone here in Cayton, who couldn't really tell me what it was from or anything like that. So they were calmed down, and I kind of could do nothing else there that night.
That was the first year that I was hired by the Beacon, so I was a cub reporter. I think I was hired that January, and this occurred in August of '78. I had been assigned to cover Wayne County, and so, you know, I was doing my thing every day there. But this was kind of the first feature story that was off my beat, and the reason that I got it was because A, I was close to Minerva, and B, I live on a farm, so this concerns animals, and I got all the animal stories. So I was used to covering Wayne County government and feature stories there, and farming stuff, and agriculture, the agriculture center there at the OARDC, so that kind of thing.
When she came down, she mainly talked to my mother and father at the time. You know, I pretty much stayed out of it, let them do their talking, and explained to them what they seen and everything like that. But yeah, Barb pretty much dealt with my mom and dad at the time.
I was just sort of curious at first and just collecting information, and Deputy Shannon was there most of the time, and so we were conversing and going over things and going over the property and looking at things together, and also a photographer from the Beacon, the late Ted Walls, was down there with me, and so the three of us spent an awful lot of time on the Cayton property checking things out, and we even spent quite a few evenings on the Cayton porch sort of waiting to see if something was going to show up or something would happen.
I was a deputy sheriff assigned to the patrol division of the Stark County Sheriff's Office. Everything that came down the road, traffic accidents, bar fights, you know, whatever arose, we responded to and dealt with. Back then we had 4 patrol zones. They were basically the northwest end of the county, the northeast end, the southwest end, and the southeast end, where Minerva is situated. On the night in question, I was assigned to the southeast end, or the Paris Township, East Cayton. There's a number of small little villages out that way, and more or less farming or agricultural areas.
Jim and I became fairly good friends, and he became fairly good friends with the family and everything. Yeah, I remember when Jim came down a lot. He was here a lot. Jim and his partner, Sam, they was the first ones ever to investigate it for my family. And they'd come down, they'd go up on a strip mine with us, they'd look around and investigate and see what they find. They found a bedding right there behind the house, approximately 12 foot round. And they had one of their deputies come down and lay in it. They said it looked like a baby laying on a king size bed. And I think that was the same time that they found the droppings and things like that. And yeah, Jim and Sam was down there almost every night for a couple weeks, even after hours. When they get off duty, they came out and sat down here with my parents and us.
In back of their house a good ways, there was a ravine, and going down to the ravine, it was just solid multiflora rows. And you couldn't have gone through there without getting all torn up. And it almost looked like there was an oval carved out of the multiflora rows, and straight down at the bottom, it was maybe, I don't know, 8 or 10 feet to the bottom of this ravine. And at the bottom, it seemed to have all sorts of squished leaves and, branches and matter and stuff that had been tamped down like something had been sleeping there. And I remember Deputy Shannon saying that hair samples had been taken from those thorn bushes, and I think they were sent to Malone College. Why they were sent to Malone, I don't know. And then when we tried to track them down later, they either said they lost them or never had them or something like that. So we don't know what happened to those. But he said he did take a hair sample out of the thorn bushes going down to the bottom of this ravine.
So the following morning when the sun came up, we got, a couple of us took out a couple of our four-wheel drive Jeeps and went back down through there. There was behind these folks' house was a strip mine. And they tried to rehab it, but it still had a lot of junk in it and all that sorts of things. So we went down there and looked, and it was a nice day that day, and spent a couple hours looking around and found nothing. In a search in the daylight just behind their house, I found a bone, and it was an old bone, but I took it anyway, and we submitted it again to Malone College, and they determined it was a jawbone from a cow. So that kind of pretty much ended my involvement with that case right then and there for that period of time.
We used to have rock throwing almost every night, and it was just a game. We throw rocks, they throw rocks, they throw rocks, we throw them back. Well, one night we wanted to be curious and see what would happen, so we started marking. We throw a rock up, or we mark it with a big X with a marker. We throw it up on the strip mine. A couple minutes later, that same rock would come back down with the marking still on, and the rock would be warm, and it was just kind of funny. All right, we're playing a game here, but it was weird how that rock would come back down to us that we marked and have its exact same markings on there. And one night, one of our neighbor ladies was over here, and she had a set of glasses on, wore glasses. And she goes, "If you think you're so smart," she goes, "why don't you hit me right between the eyes with a rock?" And it wasn't 30 seconds later, she got beamed right between the eyes with a rock. Broke her glasses, she had a big knot on her head. And we all thought that was funny. We thought, well, someone just throwing rocks, but we never thought that someone would actually throw a rock and hit her, But yeah, we made games out of it. When I was younger, it was just something that, okay, we got his attention. Let's see what we can do with it. But yeah, we had rocks constantly. And mid 70s, late 70s. That's when it really started getting active, and that's when all the publicity started coming around. And we seen it walking on the banks out there, and like I said, we thought it was just some guy messing around. So one night it was messing around. It was really bothersome, wanted attention, or just. And my brother, myself, and 2 or 3 of our friends, we chased this thing down. And this was in '78, and we got it on the other side of the strip mine bank, and we jumped on it, thinking it was just a man messing around. And at that time, it threw the 5 of us off of us, like, it's just a guy throwing some kids off his back, wrestling around with them. What happened to bite my brother, and he had teeth mark probably 3.5 inches in diameter on his back, and we could, they took pictures of it and everything like that. But it ran down the bank and it jumped over the side, and that was it for the night.
Something initially happened to their dog. It was chained to a doghouse, and it was found like out of its collar and dead, and they didn't know what was happening.
The dog we had at the time, it was a German Shepherd, and when we got her, she was a guard dog. We got her off the neighbor. And she was, when he fed her, he had to hold a stick because she was that mean. And for some reason, he gave her to my dad, and my dad brought her over here. And it wasn't within 48 hours. That dog was just as calm and gentle as could be. And this thing was messing around, and the dog dug a tunnel. I'd say probably 5-6 foot deep, and that's where the dog would sleep at night. And whether this thing liked barking dogs or what, I don't know. But yeah, we woke up one night, the dog was still in the fit. And we woke up the next day, and the dog was laying on the thing with his neck broke, still on his chain, and had plenty of room where he didn't choke himself out. You know what I mean? He was just laying there dead with his neck broke. Several people in the trailer park that saw it. There was one gentleman lived down there at the time, and it was in the same duration that this was going on here heavily, that it came down and beat on his window of his trailer, and I'm assuming the sheriff and everybody talked to him like they talked to me. Whether he gave his report, I don't know. But yeah, he'd reported a few times. Actually, a couple people reported that there was a mishaps going on down there also.
Folks from the trailer park, and I think there was a gentleman living who sort of shared their driveway, and later on, in later months, he saw it cross the road on Route 30 and stop and look, and he described it the same way that the Caytons did. And in fact, that's kind of what convinced Deputy Shannon and I that these people were not perpetrating a hoax, because they all described it the same way. They never changed their story. Finally, we had a Beacon Journal artist, Denny Hawes, come down, and he basically made a police sketch based on their descriptions, and they all described it the same way, same height, same approximate weight, and the hands were like this, sort of with palms out and thumbs out, and sort of bowed shorter legs. And they always described it exactly the same way, and their descriptions all agreed with each other.
Someone traveling on Route 30 during that same period of time, the summer of '78, had also seen this creature run across the highway in front of them, but never reported it because of the nobody would believe me kind of thing.
We used to play football and everything down there in the field, and the neighborhood kids, they was all talking about it, and actually a lot of them was afraid to come out at night after they told them what they seen and all that. I was 10 years old at that time, and right around that time there, the neighbors over there was complaining that they seen they thought it was Bigfoot and all that, and they said they seen green eyes looking in the windows, and then the garage had shingles tore off of it, and there was claw marks on there, and after that they started going up in the woods, hunting, seeing what they could see, trying to see it at night, even with flashlights and guns and that. And they never did, but they seen some footprints. It was long like that would be, you know, and it was no bear because theirs is round. Everybody knows that. And the claws. This didn't have claws. It had toes sticking out, and the foot was kind of long, and then the footprint was deep, like weight, you know. So that's why they really thought it was something like a caveman or something big. That's what they said. That they didn't say nothing about Bigfoot then, but they heard trees cracking and stuff, but they actually never seen it. They just was scared because they didn't know what it was for sure.
There was reports coming out of people down around that trailer park seeing things. I don't know what they saw. I was 8 years old at the time. But there was many different reports of different things being seen. I remember my father was coming down Baird Road at one time. There was a bridge, and there was an old public dump back there. And I remember him stating that he saw something really big and brown down in that dump. But that's as far as that ever went. There's strip pits behind Bunker Hill Trailer Park. And it was back there, we'd go fishing, there was a real high wall, and we'd fish by that high wall. This was after I was, I'm going to say around 14, 15. We used to take this boat out, and there was a real high cliff wall in the back. But it was a great place to fish, and we'd go back there, and we would be pelted with rocks at our boat. We would hear noises up in the woods. We just always thought it was kids playing around.
'56 and '57 is when this was really going on heavy around there. My dad, he went to the outhouse one day out there. You didn't have inside toilets then, most people didn't. And when he was in there, he heard growling and everything and noise out in the grass, and he snuck over to the window. He said he seen a big black shadow go across there. He thought it was a bear. He didn't know for sure. He thought it was a bear, and he was so scared he didn't have no gun out there or nothing, but he run to the house. I remember I was in the house and he come in and told us all about it. And he was just shaking. And he got his gun out in the house in case he was watching. He didn't go to bed all night there. Because it was after dark, probably about 10 or 11 o'clock at night. But he stayed up all night then because he was afraid to go to bed. And like I say, the neighbors was afraid to come out at night too, all around that area there. We was friends with the whole neighborhood at that time, clear down the line. And they all knew about this. And of course, some of them moved out and everything now.
Every time that this thing was around, we always seen a cat. Yeah, it always looked like a cougar. Well, according to the fishing game, cougars don't exist in Ohio. Well, they did. You know, even they can't tell me that they didn't because I know what a cougar looks like. I always did know what one. Yeah, but every time a thing was around, you always seen a cat with it. What the sequence was with them or what the connection was, I have no idea. But it was always looked like cougars that was with it.
Some of the reports that have come into the police supposedly have this thing going around with two smaller things, but the witnesses here couldn't pinpoint any kind of description on the two smaller things. They only saw it in the dark, kind of reflected in a flashlight, and it wasn't too clear, and the big thing kind of stepped in front of one of these little things, and they couldn't come up with anything clear on the two smaller things. From what they said, it didn't even sound like the two smaller things were the same species as the big thing. They seemed to be, they said, traveling on 4 legs instead of 2, and they look like big mutated cats, like big, about the size of a mountain lion, but the same color, only they had funny shaped heads.
Well, in 1978, July or August of 1978, I was going over to a friend's house to spend the afternoon, and I went to his house, and we got a bow and arrow and a BB gun, and we went down into the woods. Well, we went out to the barn, and he kept telling me about a hairy witch that lived down behind our barn. So we went down into the valley. We went through a gate. I don't know what the gate was to. It was just it was a gate, a fence gate. We went through the fence gate, and there was an old building sitting in the valley. And we were down there playing around, and the next thing you know, we were being chased by a big hairy witch with two small ones behind it. But they were running with the hairy witch. And we ran back to the house. We slammed the gate on our way through, and it stopped at the gate. When it stopped at the gate, we continued to run up to the house. We told his mom. His mom did not believe us. She told us to go play. So we went back out to the barn, and we stood there and we watched it down in a dump behind their house. But the big one was very tall. I was 8 years old, so to us, the big one was real tall. It stood upright. It walked like a man, but it took really long strides. We were running, it was like a fast walk. The small ones were right behind it, running with it. And they were, I'm gonna guess, about 4 feet tall, real hairy. But I don't remember the facial features. I don't even know if I ever actually seen the facial features. I just know the hair was really long on it. Long arms, long legs. Still to this day, I have no idea what it was. But it wasn't a bear. I can say it was not a bear.
It originally started early morning of September 6, 2011. This is the area that my son and myself were standing here when my son looked over to his left and actually saw the creature roughly about 100, 120 feet away from my left. My son was we were actually walking the deer path, and he was about 8 feet in front of me, and he just happened to stop real quick, and he looked to his left, and then he pointed, and he told me, he says, "Look." Well, at the time, a few years ago, this was a lot of brush and stuff like that, and I really couldn't see what he was talking about. So I asked him again, and then he pointed to his left, and he goes, "Right there." That's when I kind of just hunched down where I could get a better view, and there that thing stood. He stood there kind of like in a forward type gait. His arms were down to his side, and he was looking in our direction. His actual body was at an angle, but he was looking in our direction, and he was moving his upper body left and right. But where I'm standing at, his body was at an angle to me. And you could almost pretty much see him head to toe. If I were to guess weight, I would say 500, 600 pounds. You know, I couldn't tell if it was male or female. You know, I really didn't, get into that. But you couldn't really see a nose. You know what I mean? You couldn't tell if it was a hooded nose or, you couldn't tell. And the hair kind of went clear up into here, and then the hair on the forehead, it kind of came down in front of the eyes. Then the time came, my son says, I want to get out of here, I says, okay, I agree, and we actually left the area before it did.
We still see the footprints, and we still get the knocking on the trees, and we still get the knocking on the house and on the windows and everything, but it's never tried to break into my house. It's never threatened anybody. It's just pretty much just knocking on the house, saying, "Hey, I'm still here." several people coming in trucks and everything, drinking beer with guns, wanting to go back in the woods, hunting for the woods, wanting to go see if they could find this thing. And my mom and them said, no, you know, get off the property. We don't want it, you know. It's just not like that. But yeah, we've pretty much started turning people away.
Of course, it made a lot of news. It not only regionally but beyond, and it drew a lot of the people that have an interest in Bigfoot. And the only thing I remember was going down there, and I think shift change had happened, and I was working afternoons then, which would have been 2:30 in the afternoon till 10:30 at night. And I remember going down there one time on a call where the road was blocked, where so many people had parked. You'll know that that's a 2-lane road going right through there, and so many people had parked partially on the roadway that it was creating a hazard. And I might have run a few off back then. I really don't remember.
I remember it was very hot and it was very nice. Those nights that we were on the porch and everything, you could hear all the crickets and the night sounds and everything, which they said stopped, you know, if this thing was around. But unfortunately, when we were there, that never happened, so we didn't get to witness that. But yeah, it was sort of a steamy August, as I recall, and nice weather. And unfortunately, too, that was sort of helpful to the Yahoos who brought their beer and their Dobermans and were trying to kill Bigfoot. So I think if the weather had been a little more unfavorable, there would have been fewer people camped out in the strip mine.
I don't know how many times we were called down there. I know how many times I was, but how many times other guys may have been called, other deputies were called down there, I don't know. But the repository, the local newspaper, did a continuing series of stories on that back then. And I remember reading some where people from all over the country had descended on the community looking for this Bigfoot. But my involvement in it was the only thing I can remember those 2 times.
Bigfoot hunters, and they was investigating this, and they have all this research on it. Well, as far as I knew, my parents knew, it didn't even exist until then. You know what I mean? So what their criteria was, or what they had reports of, I don't know. But yeah, we had a lot of people coming saying they was Bigfoot hunters, and they did this investigation, and there's proof of it back here. Then, yeah, my mom Dad pretty much turned them away too. So.
They were embarrassed by all the attention, especially after all the Yahoos started coming in with their Dobermans and their rifles and their beer and looking for Bigfoot, and they were going to shoot him. And the not only out-of-town media, but out-of-state and out-of-country media were calling. And I think they gave them all the same answer, you know, well, it doesn't exist, and they just poo-pooed the whole thing. So yeah, they were kind of embarrassed. There is definitely a pride in Minerva. They don't want to be considered a hick town or anything like that. They want to be considered, you know, a fine, upstanding Mid-American village here. And I think there probably was the perception that, you know, this kind of made them look silly or something.
Once it hit the paper, it was just harassment after harassment, ridicule after ridicule. There was a little restaurant up by town, you know, Bigfoot ate here, and we got Bigfoot sandwiches, and it got out of control, you know. And that's pretty much when my mom and dad said, that's it, you know, we don't want no more publicity, we don't want to be involved in this no more. And it pretty much just ruined the excitement of everything, in my opinion, you know. And some of us, after we got a little bit older, we just moved away and stayed away for a while. But yeah, when it hit the news, and it was just like, we had cars going by 3-4 o'clock in the morning. My mom and dad did hollering at us, and you screaming stupid stuff like that, pulling in a driveway, coming in, turning around just to holler up at my mom and dad. And that's another reason why Jim and Sam came here after hours, and they sat on the porch with my mom and dad just to try to keep the peace, you know what I mean?
Well, Minerva, everybody played up to this in Minerva, a little small village down there. in the tip of the southeast end of the county. And a lot of the businesses used this as a, I don't know, I don't know if it drew many more customers in. But for example, there was a car wash that said Bigfoot washed here, and there's Marquee and a couple of other places I think used it as a funny saying or something.
You know, they were there in a rural area and they were making their way, and they took care of their family, and the Caytons took care of their children, and their children were, you know, in turn taking care of their parents as they got older, and it was just a very close-knit, very fine family. Yeah, very honest people, very down to earth.
I felt bad for the Caytons because they reported this, and I don't think everyone believed them. I think a lot of people believed them. I believed them, but I think there were people in the community that there's people all over the world that disbelieve this.
Well, anything I can say about my family is that they never was into wanting the attention. My mom and dad, when we grew up, we keep to ourselves. You know, we never wanted the publicity and everything. And my mom and dad was never the type of people to lash out at somebody just because of what they said. It was just, they are who they are. We are who we are. And sooner or later, what comes around goes around, you know? That's just the way my family has always been. But to be ridiculed like they were, and my dad was very protective over my mom. I'm really surprised he didn't fly off sometimes, but that's just not how my family was.
There's no doubt in my mind then or today that those folks saw something. No question in my mind. There was no booze involved. I didn't go in and say, "Hey, were you all drinking tonight?" But in conversation with them, you could certainly tell. And there's no doubt in my mind that they saw something. What they saw, I guess, is the question. But they definitely saw something. They were terrified. They were frightened to no end. Took me. I was probably there that night. I bet I was there the better part of a couple of hours, talking to them and reassuring them that everything would be okay. But no, I'm thoroughly convinced they saw something.
He was checking it out like it was, and he told me he did not believe it was a hoax. These people, told the same story every single time. Now later on in the Wall Street Journal, I think in '96, he was interviewed, and he sort of poo-pooed the idea of Bigfoot existing, and he was quoted in there as saying, well, once it robs a liquor store or something, then I'll believe in it. But at the time, we didn't know what was going on, but we thought something was going on. So
when we went back out that following morning, the whole shift went. There were 5 of us on that shift, so the whole shift went out, and I think everybody genuinely, when I told them what had happened, I think everybody genuinely believed it and wanted to see if we could find anything. Whether or not they believe that Bigfoot exists or not, nobody really ever said, and we moved on from it then. But no, there was no talk of disbelieving the people or anything like that.
I don't know that it matters so much for the town per se, but the area. I think it sort of speaks to the culture and to the honesty and, as I said, sort of salt of the earth people who live here, and the fact that they did report it. Something's going on. Somebody killed our dog, and they did report it, and they put up with all of this hassle afterward, but still stuck to their story. They never recanted. They never said, "Oh, we were just making it up," or anything like that. They stuck to their story, and years later. So I think it speaks to the kind of closeness of the community, that in the end, the Caytons were still accepted as members of the community and supported and everything, despite the few who might harass them or yell things out the window as they drove by. I still don't know if Bigfoot exists. I still don't know what to make of all of the stuff that I learned and saw and everything. I can't explain what was going on, and I don't know why there's never been any body found and never been any evidence or anything like that. So it's just one of those curious things that's going to remain a mystery.
Well, I read about it. I didn't go into an exhaustive research of it, but I read a little bit about it because I was curious too. You know, when you see somebody, a family that was that as terrified as they were, there was something to that. So, yeah, I was interested in it. Could it have really happened there? It's quite possible. If I guess I don't know if I'm a believer or non-believer, but I know I believe what I saw that night, and what I smelled that night, and the shape those people were in when I got there. So something happened.
I just want everyone to know that my mom and dad didn't make it up. They wasn't that type of people. And what they went through, they didn't deserve it. You know, they really and truly, they were genuine people. And I consider my family genuine people, you know, but to make something up like this, and I'm not putting anyone down for what they did or anything like that. It's just, it wasn't made up. And this thing to be, and for this thing, whatever it may be, it's not a monster. It's not violent. It never has been, at least with my family. It's never been violent. It's never been aggressive. But you know, they really got to understand it. This thing is what it is. Don't make it out to be something else. You know what I mean? Because then you give it a bad name, just like it attacks people. Now people won't go out and hunt it. They won't need to be hunted. Leave it alone. Let it be curious, do what it does. Leave it alone. Some of the people just got carried away with it. I mean, they were younger at the time. We all were younger at the time. Yeah, that's all it was. Nothing personal against them. Nothing personal against the town. Just we all was young and juvenile at the time, and okay, let's see how much harassment we can give them. Past is past. The Minerva Monster it's not a monster. It's just a thing.